Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Confrontation by Nathan Hystad, narrated by James Patrick Cronin. Prologue. Tarlin ran along the outer edges of the crowded stage, hoping to catch a glimpse of the regent as his personal carriage hovered toward the wide-open platform. He wondered how many of his people were gathered. It had to be close to the entire city, perhaps more, as dozens of vessels had arrived each day for the last week in preparation for the festivities. His father had spoken to him about the possibility of their humble world joining the ranks of the Concord, but Tarlin couldn't let himself believe such rumors. The Concord was a collective of the universe's most powerful planets, and he doubted there was anything Greblock could offer that they didn't already have. "Hold on, Tar," his sister Belna called from behind him. She could never keep up with him, even though she was older by 2 stars. "Fine, but you better not make me miss seeing the regent," Tarlin said, impatiently tapping his foot on the dusty ground. The floating carriage settled at the rear of the dais, and Tarlin hung at the far side of the platform, recognizing that this would be his best bet at seeing their ruler in person. The regent didn't emerge often, and the last time he'd visited, Tarlin had been stuck working for his father. He wasn't going to let that happen again. He glanced toward the massive crowd searching for his parents among the horde. His mother would have forced her husband to stand at the back, safely away from the dense crowd, far from the press of bodies. "I don't see what the big deal is," Belna said with a huff. She was out of breath, and Tarlin laughed as she craned her neck to see over the edge of the stage. "It's only the regent." A guard watched them from his standing position a few yards away, and Tarlin hoped the man hadn't heard his sister's foolish words. "Shh! Keep it down, Belle. They can detain you for less." He didn't imagine that was true, but better to err on the side of caution. The crowd erupted in a cheer, and they began to chant the word Concord from somewhere in the middle. Within a minute, the entire promenade was shouting the name over and over, a harmonious and captivating sound. Tarlin felt compelled to join them, and he peered out the corner of his eye to see Belna uttering it quietly, mouthing the word. Her dark brown eyes were wide and round, the joy not even lost on his sister, who was always so pessimistic. A massive screen floated beyond the stage, and the crowd grew silent as the regent appeared on center stage. He was old, older than Tarlin remembered. Gray hair covered his thin head, and his spine had a stoop to it. He raised a gnarled hand, and you could have heard a pin drop among the thousands of onlookers. "Greetings, citizens of Greblock. Thank you for coming to hear me on this wondrous day. It's not only the biggest day of my 90-star life, but of this world's 1,000,000-star span. We've accomplished a lot, and because of our newly discovered mines under the deepest seas, our people have gained entry into—" He paused, and Tarlin leaned forward. His breath was held, waiting for the words to emerge from the elderly regent's lips. Tarlin peered around the few heads blocking his view to see the real man, not the version on the gigantic screen. Even from here, Tarlin noticed the regent grinning, a glimmer of youth in his aged eyes. He continued. "Entry into the Concord!" He shouted the last bit, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Tarlin had never heard anything so loud, and he glanced at his sister with a huge smile across his face. She was crying happy tears, as was everyone around them. Being part of the Concord meant so much. Tarlin could leave this world. He could join a Concord cruise ship. He could be anything he wanted to be. Dreams of new opportunities fluttered through his mind as the chants and catcalls of joy echoed around the city center. It felt like his blood was alive, and he didn't even notice the wet streaks pouring down his own cheeks. "We herald a new era for Greblock, for you all!" The regent raised his arms high into the sky. On the screen where the live video feeds were playing, the man looked immense. His back was straighter than it had been a moment ago, and even his hair appeared less gray. Things were going to change, and Tarlin was filled with enthusiasm. "Can you believe it?" his sister asked from beside him. He thought about what the regent had said about underwater mines. It was the first he'd heard of them, and he wondered what exactly they held. It didn't matter. It was exciting enough for the Concord to take them into their fold, almost unbelievable. The sky was crystal blue today, and Tarlin's gaze drifted from the outstretched arms of the regent to a tiny dot growing larger with each passing breath. He watched it, expecting to find it was only an envoy from a neighboring city late to the party. It kept expanding in size. The regent was speaking again, but Tarlin's heart was beating faster now, the thrumming of his pulse blocking the sounds of the crowd from his ears. His sister tapped his shoulder, and he turned to her wonderful smiling face. Tarlin pointed to the incoming object, and Belna followed his finger, her mouth opening wide as she saw it. Dozens more of the dots emerged from the sky, each coming incessantly, filling Tarlin with dread. He shouted for the guard's attention, but the man was watching the regent with fascination. The entire crowd was captivated by the speech, and Tarlin didn't think anyone else had spotted the invasion. He ran, grabbing Belle's wrist, pulling her along. They were already on the edge of the crowd, and he moved to the rear, searching for their parents. A ripple of cries carried from the mass of his people. Shouts of joy turned to fear in the snap of a finger, and soon everyone was running, pushing each other, trying to reach safety as the cylindrical pods lowered and commenced firing. One dropped directly above Tarlin, and he moved faster, trying to avoid the destruction. The ship was terrifying, matte black and tube-shaped, red blasts fired from below it, striking his people with impunity. Tarlin was knocked to the hard-packed dirt, his hands striking the ground. Rocks cut into his palms, and he pulled his fingers away from the press of boots all around him. Then the panicked people were gone. A red beam hit directly beside him, and Tarlin saw the group vanish as they were vaporized. He found the strength to stand. Miraculously, Belna remained there, gaping toward one of the ships as it moved farther into the promenade, wreaking havoc. "Belna, we have to go!" he shouted, grabbing her arm. His hand left a streak of blood on her as he tugged her into action. The ground shook as they ran farther from the crowd. Tarlin's eyes scanned frantically, but he couldn't find his parents anywhere among the devastation. There were fewer people moving at this point, and the sound of blasts mixed with screams filled the entire city square. It smelled sickly, like blood and terror blended together. There had to be over a dozen of the ships, each 10 times greater than the regent's carriage. His sister stopped, looking up, and Tarlin tried to pull her along. "Belle, we have to go!" he shouted, losing hold of his sister's arm. He glanced to the sky, where one of the cylinders lowered a few steps from them. "Tarlin!" Belna cried, but Tarlin was pushed aside, knocked to the ground. He scrambled to his feet to avoid being crushed by the running people. Loud, angry pulses tore through the skies, tearing apart the stage. The regent was visible on the huge screen, and Tarlin peered over in time to see the man running as a beam cut through the stage, gashing the regent to pieces. He tried to fight the overwhelming press of bodies, but he was outnumbered, and the only way to escape was to leave his sister behind. "Belle!" Tarlin shouted again, but he couldn't find her. She was smart. She'd find a way out. His decision made, he ran as fast as he could, drifting away from the crowd as the newly arrived enemy ships continued their assault. Tarlin noticed at least 5 Greblock defenders rising in the sky, emerging from the regent's palace, and he realized how ill-equipped they were compared to the attackers. The dogfights didn't last long. Pieces of the defenders crashed to the ground in a fiery mess, and Tarlin jumped out of the way as a burning body plummeted a few yards in front of him. He screamed in fury as he moved, his thin legs pumping, forcing him away from the streets and into the countryside. He bent over, panting and coughing, under the canopy of a tree, fighting to not be sick. The ground shook even at the river's edge, explosions detonating all around. There were no more defenders. The city was annihilated in the span of a few minutes. Tarlin and his sister had a muster point, a cave in the hillsides where they'd meet each other to avoid chores or long work days at their father's shop. He was sure she'd come there when she made it out. He headed for the hills, running along the riverbank until he found the rock bridge someone had built years ago, creating a place to cross the roaring water. Tarlin's feet moved through the motions, and he was soon on the far side, the cityscape shrinking in the distance as he raced from it. Tarlin wiped tears with his forearm as he stopped, his legs unable to keep moving. He searched the horizon, where more of the cylinders ruthlessly attacked other cities and nearby villages. They were under heavy assault, and Greblock had no real defense. Were his parents alive? Was anyone going to come help them? A million questions coursed through his fearful thoughts as he plodded along, hidden from prying eyes by the dense tree cover. He ended up at the hillside. The same cave he and Belna had been visiting since they were children sat hidden in the rocks, and he sought the safety of the haven. Night came, and the barrage of noises halted so suddenly, Tarlin thought he might have gone deaf. There was no way to determine how long he'd been hiding in the cave entrance, watching the terrible light show. It was dark, and Tarlin's legs burned as he propped himself up, unable to stop staring at the destruction. The world looked to be on fire. It was so foreign, Tarlin struggled to comprehend what he was seeing. Within minutes, the cylinders were gone, but evidence of their arrival was all around him as the entire skyline burned with a hot orange glow. Tarlin slumped to the ground and waited for his sister. 1. Thomas Baldwin walked through the corridors one last time before it was spoiled forever. He could grow used to this, the solitude, the silence. In less than 5 hours, there would be over 300 crew members filling the ship, but now, for a few more minutes, he was the sole inhabitant of Constantine. He bristled at the name and wished the Concord would have heeded his suggestions before going public with the official title. Once the media and the Concord worlds grabbed hold of the story, there was no turning back. "You old codger, you would have loved the attention, wouldn't you?" Tom grinned, despite himself. It could be worse. He could still be the commander on the Cecilia, one of the Concord's longest-running vessels. After spending 8 years aboard the ship, he was going to miss parts of it. Very few selective parts, but it was easy to grow attached to something, even an old vessel. Cecilia was one of a kind, apparently both in life and in her AI form on the ship. Tom had grown up hearing stories about her from his grandfather, and according to him, the admiral that became Baldwin's previous ship's namesake was a legend. Constantine hadn't been activated yet, and Tom was both dreading and anticipating the AI modeled after his grandfather. He tried to clear his head, but there were dozens of lingering concerns floating around inside his mind, bumping into one another as he prepared to launch the brand-new starship. Captain Baldwin. He tested out the title. Captain Thomas Baldwin. "Are you talking to yourself?" a voice asked from behind him. His heart raced as he spun to see Executive Lieutenant Reeve Dock leaning against the wall, as if she was casually hanging out at a lounge. "I thought I was alone." That was his explanation, and she didn't press him on it. "What do you think?" she asked, waving an arm in the air, indicating the ship as a whole. "It's a masterpiece. The Concord have really outdone themselves this time," he told her. "Have you been to the boiler room yet?" she asked. Tom paused, unsure what she was talking about. "The boiler room?" "Engineering. That's what my previous captain called the guts of the ship." Reeve grinned, and Tom felt his walls lower slightly. He had only met select members of the crew, and most of those occasions had been fairly formal. One of the downsides of becoming a new captain, the Concord chose your crew for you. On paper, Tom was pleased, and he knew the list of applicants for Constantine had been lengthy. The Concord used a mixture of statistics and personal interviews to find the most skilled and compatible crews. At least, That was what the Admiral had told him. Tom thought there was more to it. There always was when politics became involved. "Engineering, of course. Lead the way," Tom said. Reeve wasn't in uniform, and he found the sight abnormal. He was used to spending every waking moment in the black pants and long-sleeved slate-gray shirt, with the Concord's logo of their first vessel hovering over a full moon etched on the breast. His own uniform sported a red collar, the captain's collar. It still felt odd, after so many years wearing orange as commander. "Have you found your quarters yet?" he asked, trying to sound conversational. "Not yet. I wasn't supposed to be on board for 3 hours, but I just got the call from the top. The engines were sending out some abnormal readings, so they asked me to run some diagnostics," Reeve told him. "That can't be good. We haven't even left dock," Tom said, wondering if he should worry yet. "Better to find out any issues now. Believe me, we've been over this ship 1,000,000 times. Constantine is regularly running scans internally and externally. If there's an issue, we'll find it and deal with it." Reeve led him through the well-lit corridor in the ship's center. They stepped onto the pedway, the glass rails allowing them to see the greenery below. "Can you imagine?" Reeve asked, not elaborating, and Tom only nodded. "It's all quite elaborate," he told her, and she stopped in the center of the pedway to lean her elbows on the railing. Thick strands of her hair hung over her face, and she brushed them away, revealing the brightest red eyes he'd ever seen. Even for a tech-hole, her eye color was unique. "Gardens on a Concord cruise ship, with water and greenhouses. This is next-level stuff, Captain." Her eyes danced before she looked away from Tom, staring at the misting water spraying from under the pedway. The entire room was comfortable, the perfect balance of temperature and humidity. He'd spent so much time aboard starships that the only green space he saw was when he headed to other Class 09 planets. Only then, the trees were usually bizarre, the wildlife different from Earth's in some innocuous way. Since Constantine was the flagship of a new era, the Concord hadn't held back on their long-awaited additions. It was a far cry from his previous posting, where you were more likely to see a patched-up wall or loose wires dangling in the bathrooms. From the pedway, he glanced above, seeing each of Constantine's 10 levels opening into the center of the ship. The main officers' residences would overlook the topiary, another benefit of being stationed on the flagship. Reeve appeared deep in thought, but a second later she readjusted her stance and kept walking. "Reeve, you were on Vox last, right?" he asked the chief engineer. He was unfamiliar with a lot of the crew, but he had attempted to study as many of the executive crew's files as possible. On paper, Reeve Doc was the smartest person assigned to Constantine, himself included. "That's right. I spent the last 10 years tinkering on that rust bucket," she told him. "This must be a big change," Tom told her. She shrugged as they moved through the halls. "It's a big change for all of us. 300 crew, half of them are newly graduated from the academy, and the other half were spread across 20 vessels in the Concord fleet." Tom had to laugh. "You know more about it than I do." Reeve stopped, the lightness to her voice lingering as she briefly set a hand on his forearm. "Captain, I promise to keep the ship running smoothly on a functional level. It's your job to make sure the crew does the same." A younger Tom might have resented the comment, but he was working on his attitude. The Concord had chosen him out of nearly 100,000 officers around their network, and he wasn't going to mess this up. "You have a deal," Tom assured her. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "I'd be lying if I said otherwise," he admitted. "Good. I'd be worried if you weren't." "I've followed your career," Reeve told him, and Tom raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "Sure. I mean the grandson of the famed Constantine Baldwin. Who wouldn't be interested?" she asked. Tom sighed. It always came to this, and he'd tried to mentally prepare himself for it again. The luster had worn off quickly on his last posting, but here, with all the attention the ship was garnering, he'd be in the spotlight again. not for his own accolades, but for those of his grandfather. "I'm sorry. I'm sure you get that all the time. I can't imagine. If it helps, my grandfather never did anything but pick rocks from fields in the wastelands of Nolix," Reeve said jokingly. He was going to like this one. "I don't think that helps, but I'm glad you found your way out." "Me too." "I see another doc on the crew manifest. Relative?" Tom asked. "My brother," she said. "He's a bit of a stick in the mud, but he's loyal as a guard dog." "That's a good thing in a chief of security," Tom said, smiling at her. They arrived at the main elevator, of which there were 5 side by side, and Reeve chose the center one. "Engineering," she told the computer, and the lift lowered to the bowels of the ship. Tom had never worried about the ship's drive much on his previous charge, mostly because it was always damp and musty in the room. When the elevators opened, he was half expecting the same conditions. Tom couldn't hold back his impressed whistle, and Reeve glanced at him, smiling wide to reveal a mouthful of sharp teeth. "I told you this was next level. You should have seen my last ship. It was like a bathroom and a bar on Reaper." Tom knew exactly what she meant, having frequented enough of the dives himself. "I've seen the schematics so many times, but this—" He ran a hand along the beige composite walls and noticed the lights flashing brighter as they walked through the open room toward the glowing sphere. Blue energy crackled and flickered as they neared it, and Tom searched for the center, where the black ball of Bentham floated weightlessly. "It's so beautiful," Reeve said, and Tom didn't argue with her. While it was aesthetically appealing and was the basis for the ship's star drive, the black mass of energy always made Tom feel slightly uneasy. The chief engineer remained smiling as she crossed the room to the wall, which was lined with countless screens. They projected out holograms, and her fingers moved deftly across them. Even from here, Tom could tell she was running duplicate and triplicate scans on the system's drive, seeking out the anomaly with depth they couldn't achieve remotely. "Is Constantine activated?" Tom asked nervously, wondering if he should get the introduction out of the way before he was surrounded by hundreds of other crew members and Concord officials. Reeve shook her head. "Not yet. He's ready, but they want to make an impression at the soft launch." The soft launch. Tom almost laughed at the title. Essentially, Constantine's maiden voyage was a cushy diplomatic assignment that would only take a week or so. It was as good a test run as one could hope for, but Tom would rather be out there along the border, ensuring the Concord's safety. "What could be so different with this ship's AI?" he asked, not sure he was ready for the answer yet. She wiggled her pencil-thin eyebrows and grinned again. "We'll have to wait to find that out." The computer screens went dark, and Reeve wiped the holograms away with a flick of her wrist. "Everything checks out from here. Must have been a glitch." Reeve showed Tom her office, and he noticed there was a bed in the corner. "Planning on some late nights?" he asked. "This job can be strenuous, especially when there's an issue. I was stranded on the Pleiades for a week with no engines and life support dipping every hour. We slept on the floor 2 hours at a time until we figured it out," she said. Tom had read a similar account in her records. "You mean when you figured it out?" "We were a team," Reeve admitted, and Tom liked her more for it. She was smart, but her ego was in check. He couldn't say the same for the rest of the crew. They walked away from the star drive's core, and Tom glanced at it as the lights flicked off. Brax waited in line to step foot on the already famous Constantine. He peered at his shirt, smoothing an invisible crease. "You're going to be fine. You deserve this." His sister had pinged him earlier, informing him that she was already on board. Leave it to Reeve to arrive before everyone else. Apparently, she'd taken a tour with Captain Thomas Baldwin. What a brown-noser. They were twins, but that was where their similarities ended. Brax touched the Concord symbol on his breast with pride as he stepped through the glass corridor leading from the lunar station to his new home for the next few years. Hopefully. He refused to glance up, excruciatingly aware that the millions of stars gleaming down at him would send him swaying. Brax wondered if there had ever been a chief of security on a cruise ship that was afraid of space. Surely there must have been, but the assumption granted him little comfort. Someone stopped in front of him, and he bumped into the stranger as they gawked at the immense size of the ship's hangar. Brax was larger than the man, and they stumbled forward together. "Sorry about that," Brax said, reaching out to tap the man on the shoulder. The uniformed man spun, grinning wide at Brax. "Lieutenant Commander Brax Dock." He was nearly 6 feet tall, his Concord uniform pure white. His hands were gloved, and Brax saw the tight collar around the doctor's neck. "You must be Dr. Nee." Brax tried his luck. He'd read the files, but to him it was hard to tell the Quanths apart, if only because he hadn't spent any real time with them, for good reasons. The doctor must have noticed Brax backing away a step because he nodded. "Don't be alarmed. We Quanths are only deadly if you're exposed to prolonged skin contact," Nee said with a smile, and Brax could only nod along, pretending not to be terrified. "Plus, I wear gloves and carry the antidote. Nothing to be concerned about." "If you say so," Brax told the man and cleared his throat. "I'm sorry. Nice to meet you, Doctor." "Likewise." The doctor's skin was a light shade of green, his hair white blonde, making his slotted yellow eyes appear even brighter. The hangar was filling up as newly arriving shuttles let the crew members out. Brax stood out of the way, the doctor coming to lean on the wall beside him. "Quite the sight, isn't it? Brand new ship, captain with a famous lineage. This is the stuff legends are made of." Brax bit his tongue. He was only here because of his sister, Reeve. He wanted nothing to do with making history. His job was to keep the crew safe, to protect his twin from harm. A familiar elderly man at the end of the hangar climbed up a few steps and raised a hand in the air. "If I could have your attention. The entire crew is now aboard and many are milling about, taking a brief tour of the ship. You will be split into groups of 50 and a special guide will walk you through the levels, showcasing your new station, the Constantine, in its splendor. We'll reconvene in the courtyard at 2100. Admiral Hudson stepped down and the doctor turned to Brax, his yellow eyes staring hard at the security officer. "Buddy up?" Dr. Nee asked, and Brax ran a hand over his bald scalp. "Sure. Have you seen your medical bay?" Brax asked, wondering if he was the only one who hadn't been on the ship yet. The doctor shook his head. "No, I haven't been on board before now. You?" "No, but I've been through the simulators a dozen times. I was supposed to have a walkthrough before anyone else came aboard. I'm the chief of security, and I wanted the lay of the land without crowded halls," Brax told his new friend. Nee threw him a wink. "Expecting trouble?" Brax leaned closer, his voice low. "Should I be?" "I'm only kidding around with you. Are security officers always so stiff?" Nee asked. Brax's tense shoulders loosened. "It's kind of a required disposition for the trade. That, and we all drink too much coffee." "I find it comforting that our muscle won't fall asleep on duty," Nee said with a laugh. The doctor was growing on Brax. "Shall we?" They were separated into groups, and Brax and Nee were pushed to the front, being the senior ranking officers in their group of 50. "Shouldn't we wait for our tour guide?" A hologram flickered on near the hangar's entrance to the ship, and a young face stared into Brax's eyes. "It would appear that your tour guide is already here, Lieutenant Commander Dock," the hologram said. Brax stepped away in shock and reached a hand out to the lifelike apparition. His hand passed through it, the man's chest glowing a light blue. "Please refrain from touching me," the man said, turning to their group. "I am Constantine Baldwin, this vessel's AI." "But you're young," a uniformed woman said quietly from beside me. "Yes, Constantine was young once, just as you will eventually be old. The Concord elected to personify me with a young avatar, a version of Constantine before he saved..."
Sample complete. Ready to continue?